Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. You all may have a seat. Thank you. Before the court this morning is the case of the state of Midland versus Whit Bowman. Is the prosecution ready to proceed in the case?
Yes, Your Honor. The state has a few pre-trial trial matters to attend to.
All right. Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, well, first let me hear from the state with regard to any preliminary matters they may have in the case.
Your Honor, first we would like to make appearances for the court.
Certainly.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Ashley Nelson-Rao, and together with my co-counsel, Lauren House. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
And Allie Kenny. Good morning, Your Honor. We represent the state of Midlands. Our party representative, Ms. Frances Kimball, is also present at the council table. Good morning, Your Honor.
She's permitted to remain at the table during the trial.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have a few documents that I would like to tender to the bench. First, I have a copy of the indictment in this case, the order of motions in limine, a copy of the stipulations, and a copy of the actual case law for Your Honor's records. May I approach opposing counsel and tender these documents to the bench?
Is there any objection to any of these from the defense?
I just asked to see them before she can accept the bench, Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
I just asked to see them before opposing counsel.
Yes, you may do so. All right, thank you. They are admitted.
Your Honor, if I could direct you to the order of on motions in limine, specifically on page 2, concerning the motion to exclude the audio recording.
That was left up to the court to decide. Is that correct?
Correct. Pursuant to a prior judge's rulings, the audio tape has been deemed authentic, and the defendant's motion to exclude the videotape on the alternative grounds of hearsay or under Rule 403 were also denied.
All right, so your position is the tape should be admitted into evidence. Should the court admit the entire tape or just a portion of the tape?
The entire tape.
That's your position. What is the position of the defense?
The defense has no objections at this time.
Well, then the entire tape will be played for the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this point, we would also like to invoke Rule 615 that calls for speech frustration of all witnesses with the exclusion of the defendant and any party witnesses.
Yes, the court will grant that anyone who is a witness in the case must wait outside, and you can't discuss your testimony or the testimony of any other witness. The only exceptions to that are the defendant and the police officer witness, Kimball. The purpose of having the witnesses wait outside the courtroom is that they will not be influenced by the testimony offered by any other witness in the case. So the request for sequestration is granted.
Finally, we ask for permission to move about the courtroom well freely.
You may do so.
And with that,
Presence from both sides may do so.
and with that, the state is ready to proceed.
Any preliminary matters by the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. But first, we'd like to make appearances for the court.
Please do.
Good afternoon, or good morning, Your Honor. My name is Caitlin D. Fewer, and together with my co-counsels, Katie Weber. Good morning.
Good morning.
Gabrielle Leader.
Good morning.
And Liliana Dakota.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We represent the defendant, Whit Bowman.
Good morning. All right, any other preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. I have copies of the jury instructions, the Midland Rules of Evidence, and the criminal code to send it to the bench and opposing counsel.
You may do so. Thank you.
Your Honor, we would also like to know your preference on a few things. First, should we ask permission to approach the witness
save time, you may, each side may approach the witness for the purpose of showing the witness a document.
Okay, thank you. And also, we'd like to know your preference on how to state our objections. Whether you would like us to just simply state the grounds or go to actual argument.
You may do either one. If you object or do not state ground, I may ask you for your position. Or if it's more preferable that you give an objection to the ground, you may do it that way.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right. So we're ready then to hear the opening statement from the prosecution. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I would advise the members of the jury that an opening statement is not evidence in the case. It is merely the introduction that each side is entitled to make. And hopefully these statements will alert you to the important issues, factual disputes that are involved in the case, and help you serve as a guidepost to help you follow the evidence. But the statements themselves are not evidence. The only evidence you will receive in the case are witnesses who testify from the witness stand, meaning documents or exhibits that are introduced into evidence, as well as any stipulations the parties may enter into. All right, with that preliminary out of the way, then the prosecution may proceed with their opening statement.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Behind every team is a scheme, and on August 30th, 2012, a dangerous scheme was put into action at the Rockford World Amusement Park. It resulted in serious bodily harm to an honest, hardworking member of the Rockford World Amusement Park staff. A harm so serious that this man has yet to regain consciousness since the commission of the heinous plot. This man's name is Winston Thomas. On the evening of August 30th, 2012, at the Rockford World Amusement Park, around the closing time, Miss Haley Floyd, who was managing the ticket booth, was approached by a man brandishing a pocket knife. The man threatened to use the knife against Miss Floyd in the event that she did not transfer all money from inside the ticket booth to a duffel bag that was on the man's person. Miss Floyd, who feared for her life, quickly complied with the man's demand. After the transfer was complete, the man fled from the booth westward through the amusement park. Miss Floyd was left standing, terrorized. She gave out several screams. First to respond to these screams was Security Officer Winston Thomas, who quickly commenced pursuit of the robber. Second to respond to these screams was Detective John Kimball, who was only on the site because park owner J.C. Longstreet had asked him to look into some financial matters. It has been uncovered that there has been an ongoing scandal in which the proceeds from the wristbands, which served as admission purposes, the proceeds from that have been stolen, to be quite honest, from a couple of ex-employees. Cameron Poole, who's an ex-employee of the park, who used to work at the ticket booth, and what he used to do was he would take old fake World Tour wristbands, which is the premium, most expensive wristband at the park, and he would sell them for the regular price, but then he would register it in the system as that he sold the regular admissions wristband, which is much cheaper than that wristband. This made it so that him and his partner could make profits under the table. And all his partner had to do, his defendant, Whit Bowman, all he had to do was let people onto his rides knowing that they were wearing the improper wristbands. But back to the chase. As the chase continued, it neared a ride called the Tunnel of Terror. It was at this time during the pursuit that Officer Thomas fired a shot into the air to warn the robber that he was on his tail. Shortly after both men entered the Tunnel of Terror ride, It was at this juncture that the operator of the ride at the time, Defendant Whit Bowman, switched off all the lights inside the ride. However, he did not turn off the ride itself, leaving it still in motion, creating an obvious safety hazard for anyone. Within minutes of the two men entering the ride, there was a loud collision. This collision was between the ride itself and security officer Winston Thomas. The collision knocked Officer Thomas out cold and made him incapacitated. As he was incapacitated, the robber was able to exit the ride through a hatch door, and he was able to escape from the park premises. Testifying in this case will be Ms. Haley Floyd, who will be able to identify the weapon that the robber was holding as the same pocket knife that was once in property possession of Defendant Whit Bowman. Also testifying will be park owner J.C. Longstreet. He will be offering evidence that suggests that Defendant Bowman was never authorized or given permission to utilize the controls in the operating vehicle of the Tunnel of Terror. He will also be offering some additional financial information regarding the scandal with the wristbands. Also testifying will be Detective John Kimball. He will offer evidence suggesting that Defendant Bowman received a message from the robber thanking him for helping him escape the ride. And last but not least, the last witness on behalf of the state will be Mr. Rory Shelton. Mr. Shelton will offer evidence suggesting that a day prior to the incident, Mr. Bowman told Mr. Cameron Poole, the believed robber, that he might need a knife for a job that he was to do the next day. As Defendant Bowman is being tried for robbery in the first degree, it is the state's burden to prove with almost an absolute degree of certainty that he criminally facilitated the theft in which a threat of a deadly weapon was used. The state accepts its burden as it holds that Defendant Bowman provided the means for which the robber could threaten the Miss Floyd with, that being the pocket knife. As Mr. Bowman is also being tried for theft by deception, it is the burden of the state to prove almost an absolute degree of certainty that Defendant Bowman made some kind of false impression which enabled a theft to occur of $500 or more. The state also accepts its burden as it holds that Defendant Bowman, in allowing people to ride his rides, and the fact that he knew that they had improper wristbands, he provided the means for the theft by deception to occur. Thank you.
All right, is the defense ready to proceed with their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Biljana Penkova, and together with my colleagues, we represent the defendant, Whit Bowman. Being labeled as something you are not can ruin you. But being accused of something you did not do can too. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about the state wanting to see someone pay for a crime at any cost. On August 30th, 2012, the defendant, Whit Bowman, was operating the Tunnel of Terror ride at the Rock Tour World Amusement Park. Shortly before closing, he heard a commotion from the direction of the main gate. He saw the security guard, Winston Thomas, chasing somebody through the crowd. The person whom he was chasing, we'll later come to find out, was Cameron Poole. A split second later, Mr. Bowman heard a gunshot. Mr. Bowman knew that the security guard, Winston Thomas, carried a gun and could not believe that he would fire a gun into an active riot. He did know one thing for sure, though. He had to stop the ride right away in order to prevent injury to both Mr. Thomas and Mr. Poole, as well as the guests who were actually inside of the ride. Mr. Bowman panicked, and in his panic, he scrambled to find the right button to disable the ride. Keep in mind that this was a ride Mr. Bowman was not used to operating. Again, in his panic, he pressed the button, which he thought would stop the ride and turn the lights on. But instead of the ride stopping and the lights turning off, the tunnel went totally dark. The next thing he heard was a bunch of screams and a thud from inside of the tunnel. It was only much later that Mr. Bowman realized or found out that Cameron Poole had tried to rob and did rob the main ticket booth at the park and then tried to escape. Mr. Bowman only did what he thought was right that night in order to prevent injury to the people inside the tunnel. You already heard that Mr. Bowman and Mr. Poole were acquaintances. But just because the missing suspect and Mr. Poole were friends at one point does not mean that Mr. Bowman is guilty of his friend's wrongful actions. The only thing that Mr. Bowman did that day was press the wrong button by accident. Mr. Bowman did not initiate the blackout mode on purpose. Mr. Bowman did not know anything about Cameron Poole's plan that night, but most importantly, Mr. Bowman did not want anybody to get hurt. It would not be fair for Mr. Bowman to pay for somebody else's wrongful actions. You also heard that the missing suspect carried a knife which looked like a knife Mr. Bowman had previously owned. Well, before this accident, Mr. Bowman had not seen this knife for weeks, but he never reported it stolen because to him it was always more of a souvenir than a weapon. The defendant, Mr. Bowman, was the one operating the ride in which the incident took place. And that's why the state has unreasonably chosen to hold him responsible for the missing suspect's actions. In fact, the only reason why Mr. Bowman is on trial today is because the person who took the money from the main ticket booth and caused the injury to Miss Floyd and Mr. Thomas is missing. The state simply needs somewhere to place the blame, and Mr. Bowman is quite a convenient subject. The state carries the burden of proof in this case, and in order for the state to meet its burden, at the end of this trial, you cannot be left thinking that Mr. Bowman may be guilty, could possibly be guilty, or should be found guilty. You must be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Bowman committed first-degree robbery. If you have 1% doubt that he did not, you must find Mr. Bowman not guilty of first-degree robbery. The state will attempt to convince you that he committed first-degree robbery. And in order to do this, they must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. That Mr. Bowman had the intent to act in complicity to commit a theft which caused physical injury to Haley Floyd and Winston Thomas, and that he used a dangerous instrument upon both. If you don't understand those elements right now, don't worry, the judge will later instruct you on how to interpret and apply them to this case. But the most important thing to remember is that the state cannot meet this burden. The defense will introduce 5 witnesses who will provide testimony to clearly contradict the state's team scheme plan and that the defendant is not guilty by association. The witness's testimony will further show you that the facts simply cannot prove Mr. Bowman's guilt on the robbery count. During this trial, you will hear from Miss Haley Floyd, the victim herself, and she will confirm for you that it was Cameron Poole who held the knife to her face and violently requested the money from the ticket booth. You will hear from Miss Billie Isaacs, who is another park employee, and she will confirm for you how easy it is to press the blackout, the button that initiates the blackout mode on the ride that Mr. Bowman was operating, because Miss Billie Isaacs herself has pressed that button by accident in the past. You will hear from Miss Charlie Kaminsky, who will tell you that she clearly heard the defendant say he did not want anything to do with this. You will hear from Miss Jackie Hunter, who will testify in support of Mr. Bowman's honest character. And finally, you will hear from the defendant, who will confirm for you that he had no involvement in this robbery and that his actions that day were just a mere accident. After you hear from those witnesses, it will be clear that key pieces of evidence are missing. The state cannot meet its burden. The evidence will lead you to one conclusion. The defendant, Whit Bowman, is not guilty of robbery. Remember that even if you have a 1% doubt, the state has failed to meet its burden, and you must find the defendant not guilty of first-degree robbery. It would not be fair for somebody to pay for somebody else's wrongful actions. That's all I have. Thank you.
You understand there's going to be a second opening for the defense also? Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed with that.
Your Honor. Opposing counsel. Members of the jury. The state has brought you here today because they would have you believe that Winnie Thomas is in the hospital as a result of a team scheme. But ladies and gentlemen, the evidence shows otherwise. After this team was conveniently missing, and the state is looking to Whit Bowman to take full responsibility. Seeing someone pay brings closure and finality, but it does not, and it does not mean that an innocent man should lose his freedom. It does not mean that you charge an innocent man to see someone pay. Whit Bowman is guilty of 2 things: being friends with someone capable of robbery, and not knowing his friend's true nature. Whit Bowman did not commit robbery and should not have to pay for the actions of someone else. You should not have to pay simply because the state is looking for someone to take full responsibility. On August 30th, 2012, Whit Bowman had taken over work for Billy Isaacs, who routinely left early. He had taken over at the Tunnel Terror Ride. The Tunnel Terror Ride was more relaxing and allowed Whit Bowman a break from the mind eraser, on which guests regularly get sick to their stomach. Whit Bowman had no idea Cameron Poole was planning a robbery. Whit Bowman assumed Cameron Poole had left for the day, but when he saw him running at full speed and heard a gunshot, he accidentally hit the disconnect button. He meant to turn off the ride, but he made a mistake, something we all do. He just thought that he was trying to help save his friend from an officer, Winnie Thomas, who had a reputation of overreacting and is known to carry and use his gun too quickly. He thought that Cameron's life was in danger. The state of Midlands is charged with Bowman with theft by deception of first-degree robbery. Accordingly, it bears the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt throughout this trial. If one link in the chain of evidence is missing, whether it be Whit Bowman's knowledge of the robbery or his direct and knowing participation in the robbery, you must find him innocent. Today you shall see that the state simply cannot meet its burden. You shall hear from several witnesses. Whit Bowman, who was friends with Winnie Thomas and never even joked about sticking it to the man. Billy Isaacs, who worked the Tunnel Terror regularly and acknowledged she has hit the wrong patrols on the ride before and knew Whit was a really good person. Jackie Hunter, who stated Bowman is honest and that Bowman never joked or did anything to exact revenge upon Longstreet or for the low wages or the poor working conditions. Charlie Kaminsky, a businessman who heard Bowman state he never wanted this to happen. Haley Floyd, who will confirm that Cameron Poole did this. Detective Kimball, who was friends with Longstreet and whose mentality is somehow, someone's going to pay. J.C. Longstreet, a convicted tax evader and owner of the park, who will attest to the fact that ticket sales resumed when Cameron Poole left the ticket booth. Today the state shall try to portray Whit Bowman and Cameron Poole as lifelong friends who perform the robbery together. However, friendship is not equivocal to complicity in a criminal act. Whit Bowman had no knowledge of Cameron Poole's malicious intentions to rob Rectorville, nor did he assist Cameron Poole in committing this heinous act. We're sorry for what happened to Winnie Thomas. It was tragic. Any life-threatening injury is tragic. But to make an innocent person pay is beyond tragic, because the real perpetrator cannot be found. Do not make Whit Bowman pay for something he did not do. We ask that at the end of this trial you find him innocent of robbery. Thank you.
All right, the prosecution can call their first witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to call its first witness, Ms. Haley Floyd, to the stand.
Witness, I understand, already been sworn under the oath, so we may have to.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good morning. My name is Haley Floyd, and I am the accountant at the Rectorville Amusement Park.
Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Sure. I attended Wagner College in 2007. I then obtained my master's degree in accounting in 2009 from Midland State University.
Can you please describe your duties at Proctor?
Sure. When I was first hired, I was hired to organize the park's financial records because they were a little disorganized, but then I was able to put them in check and everything was fine. And then a couple months down the road, I started doing everything a regular accountant does. You know, adding numbers, making sure everything was perfect, etc. And then I was able to convince my boss, Longstreet, the owner of the park, to get a new system. I was very lucky because she agreed.
You mentioned that you were able to convince Ms. Longstreet to get a new system. What was your system?
The system was just a way to track down the amount of tickets that were sold daily.
Can you please explain the system for us?
Sure. Well, we first started using numbered response. The numbered response were two different types of response. We had the ward tour response and the general admission response. The ticket takers would have to write down the starting number of each row of tickets at the beginning of the sheet. And then at the end of the sheet, he would have to write down the ending number. He would have to turn that in along with the cash and the credit card receipts at the park hall at the end of the day.
You mentioned world tour wristbands and general tickets. How do you know the difference between the two?
Well, the ward tour response and the general admission response are very different. The ward tour response are the popular ones. Those are $35. The general ones are $20. So you could say it was about a $15 difference. And, but the ward tour response was the most popular ones.
How does the ride operators know the difference between the two types of passes?
The ride operators know the difference between the passes because the passes have different colors, and they would often change every day so that the public could not reuse them the next day.
Let the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel what has been marked as State Exhibit 9. Ms. Floyd, I am showing you what has been marked as State Exhibit 9. Can you identify this exhibit?
Sure. These are the responses that we use at the Rockland World Amusement Park.
How do you know?
I see them every day. It's part of my job.
Are they a fair and accurate representation of the wristbands that is used at Rockland World?
Yes, they are.
I now offer what has been marked as. Can you please describe these wristbands?
Sure. As you can see, the top response are the general admission response, and those are the ones that cost $20. The middle ones, as you can see right here, are the ward tour admission response. Those are the ones that cost $35. Now, these last response, you can see it doesn't have the number that the other ones have, and it's a little faded. I just think that I saw it before.
Now, Ms. Floyd, going back to the new system of tracking sales at Rockland World, did this system seem to work?
Yes, indeed. We were able to match the cash and the credit card receipts with the number of responses that we sold daily. This helped us see where the slumps in sales came from, and also helped us see what kind of rides we would promote for the public.
What rides did you promote as a result of your new system?
Well, we promoted the Thornhill Tower, very, very popular ride. We actually included it in the ward tour admission response so that the customers can have that very popular ride as a benefit. But personally, I would never ride it. It's a little too scary for me. But we knew that including it in the ward tour response would increase our profits.
How did promoting these type of rides help increase the profits?
Well, it was very easy to target promotions and to figure out what days were most popular for the customers. This led the park to make more money. But onto one season, 2012 season, I started seeing a decline in the ward tour response. This was very odd because this park is very busy.
Can you please describe what you mean by decline in the world tour sales?
Of course, we have always had an increase in both types of admissions. Always. It was very odd to see a decline. And when I noticed in May of 2012 that there was a decline in the ward tour response, I got very worried because there was an increase in the general ones. This was mainly shocking because I was seeing that there was more guests in the park, a lot of people in the park. So how come that if we have a lot of guests, the response are decreasing? It's just not possible.
So what did you think caused the slow decline?
Well, at first I thought it was that, people were getting tired of the same stuff, People get tired, it's very common, but I wasn't sure. So I needed to make sure, so between August 2nd and August 12th, I had a couple ride operators keep a tally of the rides that each customer drove. They did this by using something we call a click counter. Click counter? Yes, that one. And then I transferred that data into something like a spreadsheet.
Let the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel what has been marked as State's Exhibit 8. Ms. Floyd, I am showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 8. Can you identify this exhibit for me?
Yes, ma'am. This is the click counter spreadsheet that I prepared to keep track of the number of rides the customer took during the week of August 2012.
Was this document prepared in the ordinary scope of Afterworld's business?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Was this document prepared by someone that has the duty to prepare such information?
Of course, I prepared this document. I am the accountant at the Afterworld company.
Now, Ms. Floyd, was this document prepared at the time that the data was being tracked by the ride operators?
Yes, it was. As I told you before, this data was tracked during the week of August 2012. At the same time, I transferred the data into the spreadsheet.
Ms. Floyd, where was the spreadsheet stored after it was prepared?
We stored this spreadsheet in the parts safe. It was very secure.
I now offer what has been marked as State's Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection? No objection. Admitted.
What, if anything, did you notice through the click counter spreadsheet, Ms. Floyd?
Well, I was very shocked to see that the number of people in the ward toward lines outnumbers the number of people in the general line significantly. This was very odd because according to our financial records, our monthly financial records, the ward toward response were decreasing by 30%.
When you discovered that something was wrong with the road toward lines, what did you do then?
Well, I decided that I should tally the rides up myself for a whole weekend every morning.
What, if anything, did you discover after you tallied the rides?
Well, I discovered that the ride operator numbers match mine, but that neither of the numbers match the ticket booth system. So I then realized that the problem was from the ticket booth.
Then what happened after you noticed that the ticket booth was the problem?
Well, I was very shocked, let me tell you. But I had my friend Rotary, he told me that he saw a few customers with the wrong response.
Objection, Your Honor.
Basis of the objection?
The wristbands were never entered into evidence.
And therefore, why is that question objectionable?
Foundation is necessary.
Well, the witness testified as to the circumstances. The wristband certainly could have been introduced into evidence, but to me, the failure to do so is not a basis for not allowing the evidence in. Is there any other basis you have to link to your objection to this witness testifying as to what someone else told her? All right. Now, what is the state's position with regard to hearsay, which is this witness testifying as to what an out-of-court declarant stated? Don't you need to call that person you were offering this for the truth of the matter asserted, are you not?
No, I'm not. May I carry on?
What purpose are you offering the statement?
Your Honor, this statement is being offered to show the effect on the listener, Floyd, that she took
Well, you could accomplish that objective by merely asking the witness, based on the information supplied to you, what actions did you take? If it's only for the effect on the listener, you could proceed to do it that way, would you not? I think that's the preferable way to do it. So, based on the information you received, what actions did you take? So, in essence, I've sustained the objection. Can you answer the question?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Based on the information that you testified you received, what, if any, action did you take? What did you do?
As previously stated, I had my friend Rotary. He told me.
Don't tell the jury what he told you. Based on what you were told, what did you do?
I decided that I needed to see for myself what was going on. So I sat in a few photo shoots to see exactly what kind of response the customers had. There, I saw that the customers had the wrong word toward response. Not only were they wrong, they were also a little faded and they didn't have the defined numbers.
After you saw that some families had on the wrong wristbands, Ms. Floyd, what did you do then?
Well, I decided to investigate the matter because I was very worried. So I went into Cameron Poole's locker. I know it was not the best choice, but I needed to do that because I was worried about the loss of the pot. I guess it's the accountant in me to try to set things right from the beginning.
Ms. Floyd, what, if anything, did you find?
In his locker, I found some old discarded wristbands along with some colored ones. You know, the old discarded ones were the ones that we used previous day.
Ms. Floyd, what did you think when you found those discarded wristbands?
I was in shock. I didn't know what to say, and I was just in shock. As I saw the wristbands, I knew that Poole had been doing something. So I came to the conclusion that he had been switching the wristbands. He had been selling the ward toward wristbands without numbers and the faded ones as ward toward real wristbands, the ones that are $35. But then in the system, he was recording them as general admissions that cost $20. So 35 minus 20 is $15. He was making a $15 profit of each wristband. I immediately knew that Poole had been switching the wristbands.
What did you do after you left the locker room?
After I left the locker room, I informed Mrs. Longstreet what was going on.
What, if anything, happened next, Ms. Floyd?
Mrs. Longstreet hired an investigator to take over the matter and insisted for me to take over the ticket booth since he wanted Poole to leave the park. So I worked the ticket booth the next day.
After you took over the ticket booth, Ms. Floyd, did you see any change in the ticket sales?
Yes, everything matched. Everything was good. Their numbers matched up to my numbers. I was very happy and I was satisfied. It was a good feeling. You could say I was very happy again. And also, since we had the Tunnel of Terror, a new ride in the park, those tickets, they were flying off the shelves.
Ms. Floyd, how did the day end at the park?
It was a good day. It was a very good day. The day before, everything was fine. Before closing, I decided that I needed to add up all the figures, and I did that a couple of times just to make sure that everything was correct. I like to be very, very straight with my numbers. I don't want anything to go wrong. But then I saw Poole approach the ticket booth. I immediately got scared and grabbed my phone.
Ms. Floyd, why were you scared?
Well, Poole wasn't supposed to be there. Poole wasn't supposed to be there, and I panicked, and he told me, "Put that away or you will regret it." He was talking about my phone. And I got really nervous, and I told him, "Poole, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be
Objection,
here."
Your Honor, hearsay.
Are you objecting on the basis of hearsay? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You're objecting to the witness describing our conversation with Mr. Poole and what Mr. Poole said to us. What is the response of the state on that objection.
Your Honor, this statement is admissible under statement against interest under Rule 804B3.
Against whose interest?
Mr. Poole.
Well, Mr. Poole's not on trial, is he?
No, he's not. Pursuant to Stipulation 3, Mr. Poole is an unavailable declarant.
So you're saying, therefore, since this was a statement made by Mr. Poole against his interest, even though he's not the defendant in this case, that is an exception to the hearsay rule, is that correct?
Correct.
How is the statement against his interest what way? What did he say? What do you proffer to the court that he said to this witness?
Your Honor, witness testified that he's saying that put that away or you'll regret it.
And what was he referring to?
He's referring to a knife.
That the conversation that Mr. Poole had with this witness,
Yes.
and he's telling this witness to put the knife away, is that correct?
No.
Well, what are you contending Mr. Poole stated to this witness? What was the statement? What did he say? She's testifying to something Mr. Poole said, right?
Right.
To her, right?
Mhm.
What did he say to her?
He said put that away or you'll regret it.
What was he referring to as putting away?
He was referring to the knife.
Who had the knife?
I'm sorry. He was referring to the phone that she was holding.
I see.
I'm sorry.
So that is a statement. Okay. Well, how is that against his penal interest?
Your Honor, because Mr. Poole, he was threatening her life, and she's just giving testimony on her perception of what she saw and heard.
And you're saying up to this point, her reception has not been objected to. Is that correct? Her description?
Yes.
I'm going to overrule the objection and allow the witness to continue the answer to every statement.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Ms. Floyd, why were you scared?
Why was I scared? Mr. Poole, as I said before, he wasn't supposed to be in the park because Mrs. Longstreet told him to leave the park. I got very nervous, and he told me to put that away or you will regret it. He was talking about my phone. I was really scared, and I started shaking, and the next thing I knew, he had a knife in my face. He whispered in my face, "Give me all the money, or I'll carve up your face. This is your fault anyways." I was speechless.
If you can recall, can you describe the knife that Mr. Poole was holding in your face?
Yes, it was a shiny, bright blue knife.
If you recall, Ms. Floyd, have you ever seen that knife before?
Yes, I believe I have, and I've seen it on Mr. Bowman. Mr. Bowman has had this knife before.
Okay, Ms. Floyd, what happened after Poole said that he would carve up your face?
I got really nervous, and I just started doing everything he told me to do. I started adding and putting all the thousands of dollars that I had adding that day. I put it in a bag. I just did everything he said. I was nervous, and I was hoping for someone to see me, but nobody saw me. And he grabbed the money, he put it in a box, and he ran away with all the thousands of dollars.
Ms. Floyd, what did you do?
I started screaming hysterically, hoping again for someone to see me. I started crying. I was nervous. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And then I saw someone chase after Poole. That someone was Mr. Winston Thomas. Poor Mr. Winston Thomas. Now he's in a coma. He started chasing after Mr. Thomas. Then Mr. Winston Thomas got hurt, and now he's trying to fight for his life.
Thank you, Ms. Floyd. No further questions.
All right. Cross-examination by the defense. You may proceed.
Morning, Ms. Lloyd.
Good morning.
Is it true that you collection of Dr. Raptors, which are memorabilia from Dr. World Amusement Park.
That is true.
Do you plan on selling your memorabilia on eBay?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Yeah, what is the relevance of her collection of Raptors?
Such as foundation and for testifying.
Well, she's testified because she's been called as a witness. What other basis do you have for admitting this evidence? What other
Bias toward Mr. J.C. Longstreet, park owner.
You're saying because she has this collection and hopes to sell it, she wants the park to do well, and if there would be some indication that Mr. Longstreet has done anything inappropriate, it would demonstrate her bias in his favor. Is that correct? On that basis, I'm going to permit the testimony to be admitted. You may answer the question.
Can you please repeat the question?
Absolutely. Do you plan on selling your memorabilia on eBay?
I do.
So once your testimony gets out to the public, you would think that people would really want to buy or purchase your memorabilia, correct?
I believe so.
Is it true that 3 years ago, Ms. Longstreet promised you a raise?
That is correct.
Have you been given that raise?
No, not yet, but I'm good with savings, so I could buy okay.
Do you think the reason why you haven't given that raise has something to do with the decline in sales of the World Tour Band in 2012? Because you were the one with the idea to come up with this band 11.
Could be.
And in regards to entering Cameron Poole's locker, and would you say this was done in order to clear your name?
No, it was not.
Okay.
I did it just because it was something that I needed to figure out, and as the accountant, I wanted to make sure that everything was straight.
Well, and making straight up. You talked about how on one 2-day weekend you recorded the values of different types of customers when you tried it.
I did.
And do you feel comfortable in just doing this on one weekend? You were confident in coming to that conclusion?
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Floyd, when the incident occurred, it was near the end of your shift, correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
You were very tired and exhausted. It was not correct.
I was tired, but that didn't prevent me from doing my job.
Well, I mean, they seemed kind of hard. Did you say in your affidavit that the sun was possibly playing tricks on you that day?
At the end of the day,
And what were you referring to? Was it playing tricks on you early in the day, or at the end of the day, or throughout the day?
could have been.
Okay, well, so can you be 100% sure that the object that you saw the man holding was a pocket knife?
Of course, he had a blade extended in my face.
So, okay. Even if there was a knife, how can you be certain that this was a knife once owned by Defendant Bowman?
Well, the knife was a shiny bright blue knife, and I saw the defendant, Mr. Bowman, with this knife a couple of weeks ago at the park.
If you saw this man carrying this weapon at the park, why didn't you report it to security or District Longstreet?
I just didn't find it important, but maybe I should have.
Moving on this one, is it true that you feel partially to blame for what happened to Officer Thomas?
I don't understand your question.
Well, I mean, he was chasing after someone who had just threatened you with a knife. Do you feel that in any way
you rank that?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may go see.
Ms. Floyd, are you here today in any way to impress Ms. Longstreet?
No, definitely not. I am just here to tell the truth.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, the witness is excused. You may step down. Thank you. Are we then ready for the next witness for the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state would like to call the second witness, Francis Kimball.
All right, Detective Kimball, Lord, this morning.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, Judge. Good morning, members of the jury. My name is Francis Kimball. And I'm a detective at the Breckenridge County Police Department and have been for 10 years.
Describe the current position.
I work in the police department's financial crimes unit. And I've also been the lead detective on many numerous embezzlement cases, which is how I began my investigation into the finances at Rockport.
How does a lead detective normally go about investigating a case?
Normally we receive a tip, and then we try to filter out which tips to follow up on. If the lead detective's opportunity to then, it's their responsibility to collect evidence, interview witnesses, and then open up a full investigation.
And is this how you went about investigating a case at Raptor Road?
Yes, through the financial crimes unit, I was asked to investigate the financial records of the tour revenues of Rockdale Road.
So starting with your first stage, did you collect any evidence?
Yes, ma'am. I collected Rockdale Road financial documents, including the 3-year summary, the parts profit and loss spreadsheet, as well as the click counter spreadsheet.
What, if anything, did you notice about the court financials?
I noticed that there was a steady decline of the World Tour tickets compared to an overall influx and increase in the park's attendance. The overall park attendance for the year of 2012 was much higher than the previous 2 seasons.
Did you notice anything else?
Yes, I went down to the park and checked a few things out, and I noticed that there was a large number of people wearing the World Tour bracelets. Well, since the World Tour ticket sales were on a decline, why were the lines so long? So I felt that there was something wrong with the numbers, and I told Ms. Longstreet my ideas.
What kind of ideas did you have?
Initially, my thought was that there was a problem within the accountant department or in the sales department.
So going on to your second stage, did you interview any witnesses?
Yes, I spoke to a few.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Well, the witness is not describing, at this point, who she talked to and what the person said. The question really calls for a yes or no answer. Did you interview any witness? You may answer that question, yes or no.
Yes.
Next question.
So what did you do when you interviewed the witnesses? Did you notice anything?
Yes, well, the witness I spoke to was
Objection,
the.
Your Honor.
If the witness is about to answer what the particular witness said to her, I'm going to sustain the objection as hearsay unless the state can persuade me it's either an exception to the hearsay rule or it doesn't amount to hearsay. Would you proffer to me what the witness is going to testify to as to what some other person stated to her?
And she's going to testify about what she noticed and what other attorneys have noticed about the wristbands that were sold, and then what she concluded based on those wristbands.
Well, let's start with the latter, conclusion. A conclusion is really an opinion. Is this witness qualified as an expert witness?
She's not an expert witness, however, she has worked as a financial crimes unit since she started working in the police force. So while she's not an expert witness, she does have experience in this area.
She may have experience, but at this point, I'm not going to let her testify as to her conclusion. And I'm not going to permit her to testify as to what any specific person stated to her, but I will permit her to testify as to what investigation she conducted as a result of the information she received. So the question to you is, based on the information you received from any individual at the park, what investigation did you conduct?
When I was able to observe that the wristbands were cheap and flimsy, and from what I remember about the wristbands, when I brought my little kids to the park, that the wristbands were not cheap and flimsy. I had to cut them off very carefully. I have them saved in my scrapbook, my memory book. So after learning that some of the wristbands were perhaps not the correct wristbands,
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to permit her to do that. That's more in the form of an observation that she made. Objection to the rule.
I had a few suggestions from Ms. Longstreet.
And what were those suggestions?
I suggested to her that she ought to print out some new wristbands and then replace the ticket booth employee, whom I later learned was Cameron Poole, and replace him with Haley Floyd, the accountant. That way, the employee was messing with the World Tour ticket bracelets, we'd be able to know.
So after suggesting this to Ms. Longstreet, did you see her again?
Yes, I had a meeting with her set for August 30th. But first I checked in with Haley Floyd, who was in the ticket booth at that time. Everything seemed to be going very smoothly, and even the World Tour revenues were soaring. So I was confident that another week of using the new wristbands and a new employee in the ticket booth, we'd be seeing similar results.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness doesn't have any evidence or doesn't have a way of knowing or predicting what the next week's sales will show based on the information provided off just one week's sales.
I'll strike that part of the answer as to what predictions she can make in the future. But her testimony as to what she observed and what happened in the week that she monitored the sales, that testimony is admissible.
So on that day of August 30th, what, if anything, did you observe while you were at the park?
Well, it was a little after 8 o'clock, and I just finished up my meeting with Ms. Longstreet when we heard what sounded like yelling and screaming from the direction of the ticket booth.
The record contract showing that the opposing counsel was marked as Exhibit 10. I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 10. Can you please identify for the jury what that is?
This is a map of the Rock World.
How do you know?
I know from all the times I've been there with my family. I go there with my husband and 2 young children. My little girl's just trying out to ride some of the fun rides. And I have a little boy, he's 5. He's just a ball of energy, and I'm all the time chasing him around this park. So I know this is the map.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of the layout of the park on or about August 30, 2012?
Yes.
And that's all for State's Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Would you like a copy?
Yes, we have an extra one. Thank you.
Commissioner, this is Exhibit 10 on element for the jury.
Yes, you may display the exhibit numbers of the jury.
Now, you say that you heard it sounded like yelling and screams from the direction of the ticket booth. Can you point out where you were standing at that time?
I was standing right about right here with Ms. Longstreet.
Let the record reflect that the detective Kimball playing near the ticket or near the trailer. And once you heard this scream, what did you do?
I ran in the direction of the ticket booth, and I heard what sounded like Miss Floyd screaming, "Stop him!"
And after you heard Miss Floyd screaming, "Stop it," what did you do?
Well, when I got to the ticket booth, she had collapsed to the ground, and she was shaking like a leaf. And she kept on repeating, "Stop him! Stop him!" So I noticed a guy who was sprinting away from the ticket booth, and I put 2 and 2 together, and I started my pursuit against the man that was fleeing the ticket booth.
So using the map, can you draw the path that you took from the ticket booth to the tunnel up there? Let the record reflect that the detective Kimball drew an arrow across his screen going from the right side to the left side. So once you saw the suspect enter the tunnel
Well, as I was near the tunnel of terror, I noticed that he was in pursuit. Another man was pursuing him also. And when I neared the tunnel, I heard the unmistakable sound of a single gunshot.
What did you do next?
It makes to clarify your testimony, Officer Kimball, for members of the jury, are you testifying that in addition to your pursuit of the suspected culprit, there was also someone else who was pursuing this individual?
Yes, sir. He was
So
being...
there were actually a total of 3 individuals in this event. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The suspected culprit of the robbery, another person pursuing the suspected culprit, and yourself.
And followed by myself, yes.
Were you behind this other individual who was pursuing the culprit?
Behind me, yes, sir.
So you were the third in line?
I'm the third.
All right. Thank you for the clarification. You may continue.
So what did you do next? Or describe the events that took place.
Well, after the gunshot, I noticed that the suspect had been hit. He started to stumble. He continued to run into the tunnel. I noticed that he and the man that was chasing him were running along the tracks. As I neared the tunnel, the lights went out, but all the cars were still in motion.
So what happened next?
Well, a second later, I heard several shouts and screams.
And then?
Well, I pulled out my flashlight and put it above my drawn weapon, and I heard a thud.
Did anything else occur?
Well, I noticed that the man who was chasing the suspect had been hit by one of the cars pretty badly.
Was there anything else?
During what time? During when I was in the tunnel?
Well, once you went into the tunnel, did you see anyone? Did you notice anything else?
In the tunnel after the man was hit, there was a 911 call that was placed by one of the passengers. So I waited for the EMTs to arrive. I later learned that the 911 call was placed by Vanessa Sullivan, who was the passenger on the ride.
So you heard the 911 call?
Yes.
And if you heard it again, now you recognize it?
Yes, ma'am.
And in your opinion, would it assist the jury members hearing the 911 call to better understand what occurred on that evening?
No, certainly.
Your Honor, I'd like to direct your attention to the preliminary matters of the motion of limine, specifically Section 8 that states that the 911 call recording has been deemed authentic and any objection to the grounds hearsay or Rule 403 have been denied.
Do I understand from the preliminary matters there's not been any objection by the defense with regard to the playing of the 911 call? Is that correct?
No objection.
All right, well, you may go ahead and play the recording in its entirety.
I'd also like permission to provide the jury with a copy of the 911 transcript for the purposes of following the law. Pursuant to Stipulation 1 is for this purpose only.
What's the defense's position on that?
No objection. No.
All right. The jury may be provided with a copy of the transcription. Yes, thank you.
It's just
Okay, thank you.
you look at the second page, there are highlighted marks, which is where the 911 call recording is going to start.
And that officer's heading toward the boat in the tunnel, so it's going to be there pretty shortly. Can you tell me how the man in the uniform was injured? Do you know?
I don't really know. It was, we had with our boat, the whole ride was pitch black, and we saw someone run out a back door. It looked like maybe an emergency exit of some kind, but it was really hard to see because it was so dark. And then we hit something, and I think it was this man, and he just slammed against the wall, and he hit his head really, really bad, and he's not moving.
Can you describe the other person? This is the one that you saw in the tunnel during the blackout.
It was too dark to really tell. It just seemed like someone of average height and build. I think it was a man, but I don't know. They were carrying something on their hand that was shiny. I don't know what it was, but there was something shiny in their hand, and then they went out the back door after everything turned dark.
All right.
Now, once TNT arrived at Miss Sullivan's call, what did you do?
Well, I continued my investigation and had witness interviews. Whit Bowman was standing right next to the ride operating booth, and I interviewed him.
What did you find out?
Mr. Bowman indicated to me that he had taken over the ride for another employee.
Anything else?
He also indicated that he did so often for this employee.
Anything else?
While I was interviewing him, I observed a smartphone that was sitting right next on the operating table. Before that, he also was able to recognize the two people that were running in his direction, the first of which being Cameron Poole, followed by Officer Winston Thomas.
Does the record reflect that showing opposing counsel what has been marked as State's Exhibit 5? I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 5 for identification. Could you please inform the jury what you're looking at?
This is a screenshot of the text message I observed on what I believe was the defendant's phone.
How do you know?
The phone was sitting right next to the defendant, Mr. Whit Bowman, on the operating booth that he was operating.
Is this actually no longer
Basis of the objection.
not a foundation, and opposing counsel has shown how that phone belonged to the defendant. And when there were multiple people operating the ride that day.
Well, the witness indicated that, as I understand it, the phone was immediately next to the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How far was it from the defendant?
A foot or two.
I think it's admissible. The defense is certainly free to argue that there's not sufficient evidence that the phone belonged to the defendant, and the prosecution can argue that the phone was the defendant's based on all the circumstances, and ultimately it's up to the jury to make that determination. But I'm going to admit the evidence.
So, what can you read to the jury? How do you know it was his?
I know it was his because it was next to him as he was operating the booth.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the text that you observed on about August 30, 2012?
Yes.
Do you text frequently?
Yes, I text all throughout the day. It's part of my duty as a detective, and I also pride myself on knowing the cool lingo of the younger generation.
And that's also State's Exhibit 5 in the evidence.
I'm afraid to let you. Yes.
Would you like a copy?
No.
No objection is admitted. Yes.
Permission of this Exhibit 5?
Yes. Permission to display to the jury.
Can you read for the jury what's on the screen?
Yes, at 10:36 in the morning, Mr. Bowman received a text from an S-cam stating to get the box and let me in, it's time. He also, Mr. Bowman then texted TOT, which I presume means tunnel of
Objection, Your
terror.
Honor. The witness is not,
Yeah, I'm going to, TO2 will be what's in evidence. In closing argument, the prosecution can argue to the jury what that stands for. But I'm not going to permit the witness to offer an opinion.
All right, and then it says 12:45 into be cool. Mr. Bowman also received a text of, he sent the text to the S-cam, wait for me. S-cam also then texted K, but hurry. S-cam texted I'm out, TTYL, which is short for...
objection, Your
I
Honor.
sustain the objection to the witness testifying as to what that stands for. Again, in closing argument, the prosecution can argue to the jury as to what it stands for, but I'm not going to permit the witness to render an opinion. Yes.
As we stated earlier, the detective has texted frequently, and
lingo?
The younger generation.
I don't even have one of those devices, so I don't know. What does TKS stand?
Thanks.
Oh. I think the English language is being absolutely butchered by Texans, but under the circumstances, I will permit the witness to testify as to what these symbols stand for.
Mayor, Sandra,
Sure.
I mean, I text often and frequently all the time too, and the first time I saw this, I had no idea what it meant.
Well, you can cross-examine the witness on it, as to how she knows what it is. But if this is what is supposed to be a form of the English language that is known to the witness, then I would permit the witness to answer the question. I'm not going to permit the witness to answer the TOT because that, I think, is not a form of language or location. You could argue to the jury what you intend to mean. But the TTYL, TKS, the witness can testify and her understanding what that means.
Yeah, so once again, Mr. Rowan received a text from him saying, I'm out, TTYL, meaning talk to you later, and TKS, meaning thanks. And then Mr. Rowan also then sent a text saying, where are you? And call me now.
When were those last texts received?
The last text was received at 8:19, which is shortly after the incident, after the suspects exited via the tunnel of terror back exit, that the defendant, Whit Bowman, was operating.
Thank you, that is all I'm saying.
Call, wait, cross-examination.
Detective Kimball, you were asked to investigate a series of thefts from the Rochester World Amusement Park, correct?
Yes, ma'am, for what was believed to be an ongoing theft ring.
Isn't it true that, in your own words, quote, this was more of a favor to Ms. Longstreet than a full investigation?
Well, initially that's how it started out to be. It was a favor, in my opinion, but then I did open up a full investigation.
Let's provide a little bit of background here. You worked at Rochester World, right?
I did prior to going into the force.
And that was when you were going through a lot with your mother being ill, weren't you?
My mama got sick, and I didn't want too much on her plate, so I put off going to the academy until she was better.
Isn't it true that Miss Longstreet hired you because you wanted to be a future member of the Midlands Police Department?
That could have been one of the reasons.
Well, isn't it true that upon hiring you, referring to you being a future member of the police force, Miss Longstreet remarked that she never knew when she might need a friend like this?
Objection, hearsay.
Yeah, but I think it's for the purpose of the effects on the listener, and more importantly, it goes to the potential bias the witness may have in favor of Mrs. Longstreet. So I overrule the objections.
May I re-ask the question? Isn't it true that upon hiring you, referring to you being a future member of the police force, Miss Longstreet remarked that she never knew when she might need a friend like this?
She said that, but I think we all could use some more friends.
But are you a future police officer, right?
Friends in all kinds of places.
Isn't it true that Miss Longstreet hired you on the spot, didn't she?
She must have been very impressed. Yes, she did.
And that was when your mother was sick and you were not able to go into the police academy because it was too much to handle, right?
Not too much for me to handle, but too much for my mom to handle.
Miss Longstreet was good to you, wasn't she?
She was a nice boss.
She gave you your pick of hours? Miss Longstreet allowed you to duck out whenever you needed to help at home?
She was very understanding.
Can I take that as a yes?
You can.
When you finally got into the police academy, Miss Longstreet threw you a big party, didn't she?
Yes.
And you feel like you owe her so much, isn't that true?
I owe her a lot, but I like to give it all over to God.
So can I take that as a yes, you owe her so much?
I owe her, yes.
Detective Kimball, you personally knew one of the victims, Winston Thomas, or may I refer to him as you do, Winnie?
Winnie? Yes, I knew him very much.
In fact, Winnie got you your initial job at the Rochester World as a security guard before you became a police officer, correct?
He helped me out a great deal that summer.
Isn't it true that in your own words, he, quote, helped you pick up the slack at work?
He was very helpful to me as well as to all the other employees.
Can I take that as a yes?
Yes.
Let me direct your attention to the day of August 30th, 2012. On that day, you performed a favor to Miss Longstreet by investigating some theft at the park, correct?
On August 30th, I was following up. I had already started the investigation, so I was there with my meeting with Ms. Longstreet, yes.
And this investigation involved financial records, correct?
Yes, it did. A review of the revenues.
In investigating those thefts, you had to go through 3 years of financial records, correct?
Yes, it was a 3-year summary.
And those park records were usually handled by the park's accountant, Haley Floyd, correct?
Yes, she prepared them.
On direct, you testified that you made an observation while you were at the park, that you made some observations while you were at the park regarding the sales and bracelets and all that stuff that you testified.
I made lots of observations.
Okay.
That was one of them.
You said that you noticed that the World Tour ticket sales were down, right?
The revenues were on a decline.
Okay. And you also said that, and those are the ones that let you skip the lines, correct? The Speedy Pass ones?
The World Tour ones, yeah, they're the special ones. They're the ones everyone wants.
Okay. And you said that the lines were long when you were there?
Yes, there was a large number of people riding those, yes.
But the lines were long?
Yes, they were.
So doesn't it make sense that if the sales of the Speedy Pass tickets were down, the lines would in fact be longer?
The large number of people who were wearing the World Tour bracelets, those lines were longer. The people wearing the World Tour bracelets, there was a large number of people wearing those bracelets. So then why were the sales on a decline? If people were wearing the bracelets, why were those sales down? If the sales were down, why were so many people wearing those bracelets? So there was a large number of people wearing those bracelets.
You're not a certified accountant, are you?
No, ma'am.
And you're not a financial analyst?
No, I'm not.
So after your initial review of the records, you filed an official report opening the investigation on the ticket sales and accounting procedures?
Yes, a full investigation of the financial crimes unit, yes.
But you still didn't submit the records to a forensic accountant, did you?
To me, it was just simple mathematics.
Okay, but those records were usually, you already said that those records were usually handled by Ms. Haley Floyd, the certified accountant, correct?
She compiled the documents that I looked over.
Let me move you to a little bit later in that day. Shortly before were closing on August 30th, you heard yelling from the ticket booth, from the direction of the ticket booth, correct?
Yes, ma'am. It was about an hour or so before closing.
And you heard Miss Floyd yell, "Stop him."
Frantically screaming, "Stop him!"
You saw a figure running through the crowd with someone chasing him, correct?
Yes.
And then you clearly heard a gunshot, didn't you?
Unmistakable.
Right after the gunshot, you saw a figure stumble,
Yes, a suspect.
but he continued into the tunnel of terror, right?
Yes, we both did.
When you got inside of the ride, you saw that the second person was hit by one of the cars, correct?
Yes.
And that was somebody you knew, Winnie Thomas, the gentleman that got you your initial job at the Rockford Room.
It wasn't until I got off the phone to him that I noticed that it was Officer Winston Thomas.
And he was alive and breathing, thank God, right?
Thank God.
Isn't it true that Winnie Thomas was your father's partner when he was a police officer?
Back in the day,
Isn't it true that, in your own words, quote, you couldn't help